Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Walsh, as a freshman senator, I can tell you one thing, just relax. You're an amateur. You will never compete for the world record of forgetting to turn your mic on.
Thank you. That makes me feel much.
The second thing is I agree with you in the ranking member. And Senator Flake, Senator Kane, and others have said this. I have an open mind to this negotiation. We don't know what we don't know yet. It's not been fully released. It's not finalized and so forth. But I don't think, and I think Senator Kane's got his hand on it, that these hearings have been very helpful for us to get our heads wrapped around, or as the mental centrifuges, as you say. I like that. I haven't seen it, I haven't heard that before. But to think about this in terms of what we feel like are the minimum requirements. And we've been told by experts, and I'm impressed with the testimony today, very impressed. We were told just yesterday that, you know, there are two ways that Iran is going to potentially develop a nuclear weapons capability. One is through just waiting us out, you know, through a 10-year deal, as we just were discussing. And the second is through a covert exercise. And so we have inspections and verification to enforce the rules of the negotiation, whatever it turns out to be. So we all know we have to have a verification regime. But the second is intelligence. And we heard yesterday that we don't have a high confidence level right now, that our intelligence capability is such that it can actually deter that. And we have evidence of that. I mean, Perdue was created in an operation for years before we discovered what they were doing there. We also know that today Iran is in violation of the current inspection regime. We just discussed that. And I want to talk about the State Department. But before I do that, just this weekend, on Sunday, Iran's parliament approved the outlines of a bill, this is formal now, to ban inspections on military. This is not just a comment by the Ayatollah, on military sites and require the lifting of all sanctions under any nuclear deal. This passed 199 to 14. I have two questions. I want to know who the 14 people are. But exactly. You know, who are those 14 guys? I'd like to recruit them to the Republican side, Senator. But
I think
in all
the vote
seriousness,
was 213.
yeah, exactly, or 13. Thank you. In all seriousness, in backing that up, the Ayatollah made a speech just Sunday on Iranian television, state TV, to demand that most sanctions be lifted before Tehran dismantles any of its nuclear infrastructure. Combine that with the evidence that we now have. We have a report, and the other thing that's coming out of this is that this is not a static situation. It's a dynamic situation. We'll have to be, if we really want to achieve the goal of not allowing Iran to become a nuclear weapons state, not now, not in 10 years, not ever, then this has to be an ongoing thing past 10 years. It has to be a dynamic situation of inspection, verification, and intelligence efforts to make sure that they don't do this. So one of the things that we have to rely on as a Senate is reports back to us. I think this agreement right now, the bill, the Corker-Menendez-Cardin bill has in there that the State Department reports back to us, I think, every 6 months. And yet we have a GAO report here just released in May of 2015, and it's non-proliferation. State Department should minimize reporting delays that may affect sanctions on trade with Iran and North Korea and Syria. So they're not just talking about Iran. And in the reports that they have been providing to us over the last 6 years anyway, they've averaged 22 to 36-month delays. In an environment where we're all in agreement that 22 to 36 months, 36 days can be a lifetime. I'm very concerned about our ability to keep up with what we are learning as a government with regard to Iran. Dr. Takei, would you respond to that and give me your observations? I'd like all of you to give me a brief response to this trust that we're now having. And the State Department is basically saying in the GAO report that there are certain things like political concerns and other delays that might delay the process in notifying Congress. But I personally find that unacceptable, as does the GAO. I'd love your response to this idea of an ongoing involvement in this and the dependence that we have on any State Department, whether it be this administration or any, to keep us involved.
I would say in terms of any arms control agreement, there are two aspects of it. There's verification, and people have talked about verification, but there's also enforcement. Verification is a burglar system. It tells you there's a burglar in your house. The question is, what do you do about it? Historically, arms control agreements have been difficult to enforce. I mean, as this committee knows, the Russian Federation has been in violation of the INF agreement for how many years? Historically, that's not unusual, by the way. the international community becomes invested in the agreement. And there are two types of violations that arms controllers talk about, and Jim and David can speak about this more authoritatively. One is simple irregularities and small-scale violations, which they tend to resolve through adjudication. And this arms control agreement will have what every other one has, a verification and compliance committee. The second is material breach. So when do you say, we got to get out of this? It almost never gets to the material breach because there's so many international actors invested in perpetuation of the agreement. And they agree that the argument at that time will be, if we walk away from this agreement, they're going to go from 200 centrifuges to 25,000 centrifuges. It's an unfortunate talking point. The first time I heard it was in 2007 in Javad Zarif's office. He told me that. That's the first time I heard it. We shouldn't appropriate it because they paid a heavy price for that. Number one, finally, I would say that this agreement can be measurably improved if they address the issue of sunset clause. I have never seen anybody defend the sunset clause. Senator Walsh, not Senator Kaine, my dear friend Senator Walsh, didn't actually defend the sunset clause. He said they're not going to do it afterwards. Is that a promotion? So I would say there are things that you can do to improve the agreement, but actually enforcing an arms control agreement, we have about 50 years of experience with this. It's very difficult to do. Remobilization of the international community, reconstituting any kind of sanctions regime, establishing a military deterrent that is I think that's just, this agreement, should it be violated, and Iranian violations always tend to be incremental and never egregious. So a series of cascade of violations could actually lead them to increase their capacity without significant punitive measures. And finally, I'll say this, I know I went too far. If you look at Islamic Republic's foreign policy for the past 35 years, they have what we sometimes call a Cuban crisis approach. They push, they push, they push, they push, and they retreat. The idea is that as you push, once you retreat, you still have derived some dividends. So that's how they kind of approach their foreign relations. And if that's how they approach their nuclear arms, a nuclear program, then it doesn't augur well for its longevity, much less its viability. I went too long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.